Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, will you be upstanding, please? So good morning. Good morning? No, that's in my run sheet. Sorry. Good afternoon. Almighty God, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Please guide our hearts and minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today to the advancement and true welfare of our people and of Australia. Amen. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders, past and present. The Armidale Regional Community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people, and love of culture. We all share the beauty of this land, the richness of its soil, and the uniqueness of its wildlife. Let us walk together in the footsteps of love and understanding. While valuing diversity, let us share the same hope for a better future. Now, this meeting has been audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by the council to do so. Now, as far as the have your say, all speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or use abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. So thank you. Now, thank you, councillors. The disclosure and declarations of interest, do we have any for this meeting today, please? Mr. CEO?
Mr. Mayor, with regards to item 12.2 on the agenda for 12.3 on the agenda for today's meeting, I declare an interest in that. I worked with a party that is working for the Tas school, and based on that knowledge of that particular person in the past, I declare an interest and I will leave the meeting whilst that matter is being discussed.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Excuse my voice, it's starting to disappear on me. Now, the have your say, we've got 3 speakers today. Each speaker, may I ask you to confine your speech to 5 minutes, and I will give you a warning at the 4-minute mark, and therefore you have 1 minute to finish. So we've got the first speaker is David Mills. Could you come up to the podium, please?
That's on, working, great. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councillors, the gallery and the council executive. It gives me great pleasure to get up here again and discuss this passionate topic, which is the New England Rail Trail. It's been going for some 4 years, and we're here today to obviously support the rescission motion. We find it very important to support this motion for a few reasons. Probably the number one is that we need to clearly understand the facts, and that's something that we have been trying to put together in such a fashion from the old former Guyra Shire Council, and with the untimely proposal and also the amalgamation, we now seek Armidale Regional Council's support in finding the facts. We do have a Well, the Armidale Regional Council did look back in July 2017 and adopted the Economic Development Strategy, which clearly indicated the support of the New England Rail Trail. It also indicated that a feasibility study and a business case would be carried out. We also had the Merrill Minute back in February there, which clearly stated that Armidale Regional Council conduct a comprehensive investigation and discovery into all relevant information and conduct further community consultation. So once again, the investigations have been completed as per the Merrill Minute there. So we really would like everyone to understand what the facts are, what they could mean for our region, and what they could mean for our community. Our Guyra community has been consulted quite strongly, and there has been a considerable amount of support there through the CBD. Over 90% of the 83 businesses, the corridor, people who graze on the corridor, the residents along the corridor, etc. So we actually are really seeking Armidale Regional Council support to help us understand the facts. In saying that, we also strongly support and thank the councillors for putting forward a new motion to understand the facts. We find it quite timely that there has been a study just completed regarding the rail study and the viability of the rail line from Armidale to Wallangarra. So again, that's another study. ARTC carried one out in 2006. It also indicated a price for those councillors that have ever delved in and had a bit of a look into that, which was to be competitive to the inland rail route. So there's certainly some in-depth study there. There's obviously now the desktop study that has been carried out by AEC, and in both cases we're still left with abandonment for over 30 years. Now I think I won't talk any more about obviously the opportunities, but we just really want to understand the facts, and they're certainly out there in many other regions, many other countries, and
1 minute, David.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So, Mr. Mayor, so in closing there, I don't have a great deal more to say, only that we really hope that the Council can, with all the work that has been carried out to date, to understand the facts before making any further decision. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Michael Keane, please.
G'day. I'm here to explain why I think a detailed study should be carried out for the various use cases of the Great Northern Railway. And I'll just preface this by saying I'm a member of NERT, but the words I'm speaking today are my own. One of the best things about train travel, is the scenery you see whizzing by as you get from A to B. It's the same thing that makes us want to go out to Ebor Falls or to take a walk around Jimerick Dam. And since the trains have stopped running on the Great Northern Line, that scenery's been all but lost to us. And a rail trail will bring that back so that we can all enjoy it again, with the added benefit of having a safe corridor with a self-paced exercise area, and also being extra tourist dollars into towns along the way. Last month, Councillor O'Connor said how much she appreciated the forward planning that went into the same, to Sydney and the green spaces, and I agree. That same forward planning once applied to the Great Northern Railway, but now it's a bit like the copper phone network, poorly maintained and fading away while people have moved on to other technologies. But the underlying asset is still there, the path itself. One of the great things about a rail trail is that it preserves the corridor. So if in future a new rail or similar technology service becomes viable, it should be easy to, or relatively easy to rebuild on the line on the same land. In the interim, it's an asset that's sitting there idle. On Monday, I emailed several councillors to share my views and ask for theirs. And Councillor O'Connor raised an interesting and concerning point that there could be a danger that a government might decide to sell off the land once the line is closed. In the case of the New South Wales Rosewood to Tumbarumba rail trail, there was a conditional clause on the closure of the line to ensure it could only be dedicated for use as a rail trail for recreational purposes. But I don't know how watertight this type of legislation is, as I've got no political or legal background. But I would consider it to be a fairly critical issue that if a rail line was to return to viability one day, having the line from Armidale to Brisbane is a major asset that we don't want to lose. Rail enthusiasts may argue that rail trail supporters will want to rip up the lines, and that is undeniably true. It sounds like a terrible thing to do. It's like tearing the heart out of the line. But as the AEC study already shows, the existing line is already, in most cases, too far gone to be reused as it is. However, many rail trails do preserve sections of the line and also make an effort to preserve all the line markings, the signals, the signage, etc., as a tribute and reminder to what the line once was. And in sufficiently wide areas, they can be reserved for things like rail bikes and similar light vehicles that don't impose too much stress on the lines themselves. My wife and I flew over to New Zealand to ride their one of the first ever rail trails, and in the process I learned a lot about how they're made, how they're built, etc. I've posted several photos and videos online at goro.net/railtrail if you'd like to see what one actually looks like. In short, they're pretty simple really, a gravel track about 2 metres wide in most cases. Additional timbers are slotted into rail bridges to make them safe for travel, pedestrian travel. Miniature cattle grids are placed alongside gates to allow bikes and pedestrians through, but blocking access to livestock and larger vehicles. Of course, it's easy for me to stand up here and say that a rail trail is a great thing to have, but I'm not the one who's building it or looking at the cost of construction and maintenance. And that's why I believe we need a comprehensive investigation done to confirm if it's a viable project. And although it sounds like a lot of money, it's relatively cheap compared to the $700,000 we spent on Somers. I believe it also needs to have majority public support from the Armidale and Guyra residents, but caution that if a vote is to be held in some form in the future...
Michael, 1 minute.
No problem. It needs to be factual and present all possible use cases, not just the rail trail itself, so that residents can have a pretty good informed and unbiased view of what the situation is. And since this is such a uniquely emotive issue for some people, please do what you can as a council to get the best unbiased information so that we can get the uses for each possible use case for the corridor. That way, if a rail trail is found to be the best use for the corridor at this present time, then chances of people on all sides claiming there is a bias is minimised. So in closing, I just want to say again that a rail trail doesn't mean the end of trains in the future. And I'd also like to thank Councillor O'Connor, Tiley, Murat and Galitley for taking the time to reply to my emails this week. And they've helped me to understand your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Now, Matthew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillors. I'd like to take some exercise on a rail trail myself. The spectacular Otago Rail Trail in New Zealand's been on my list for years, and I would probably enjoy cycling along the more rural Main Northern Railway. But regrettably, I hope that pleasure does not come about for any of us under this particular proposal from NERT, because the opportunity cost is just too great, involving the destruction of a railway line and the loss of legal protection for 214 kilometres of interstate railway corridor, so that there will be a real risk of its being sold. It's the long part marked blue on the rail network map, and you will see that there are not many lines reaching Queensland from northern New South Wales. Now, some of those against this rail trail proposal are owners of rural land adjoining the corridor with concerns about loss of privacy, antisocial behaviour and biosecurity. Some might feel that these concerns can be managed, but it's not for us to dismiss out of hand the serious objections of those who are on the spot, many of whom lease and care for portions of the railway land. Some people north of Armidale oppose the rail trail because they would like to get the trains running again in the short to medium term to serve their communities. Well, it may be easy to dismiss those ambitions as commercially unrealistic, but the citizens of Armidale, of which I'm one, enjoy the benefit of a daily passenger train service which is increasingly popular and, like the trains in Sydney, does not operate commercially at a profit. Armidale fought to get the trains back in November 1993 so that they still run on the part of the line marked yellow on the rail network map. We in Armidale, enjoying the great advantages of a government-subsidised train, are in no position to sneer at those in Guyra or Glen Innes who live along the same line and seek the same amenity and economic boost for their communities, regardless of how difficult that might be to achieve in the short to medium term. They know that the realisation of their hopes depends upon defending that railway line and corridor, and I expect that they will defend it all the way to Parliament in Macquarie Street. Thirdly, there are those in this region and beyond who recognise that the main Northern Railway, both the operational parts and the part that's in mothballs, is a vital interstate rail transport artery, an important asset for the medium to long-term future. It is recognised in the Ernst & Young North-South Rail Corridor Study of 2006, that's it there, as a main line connecting with the Queensland system at Wallangarra. The main Northern Railway corridor is needed by this region and the nation for future development in the medium to long term, and those who recognise this will certainly defend it all the way to State Parliament and the government. In the mid-1990s, when the line north of Armidale was becoming non-operational, not, I might say, the mid-1970s, as incorrectly stated in the little AEC report, the Friends of the Northern Railway Group and others were given the strongest assurances that the main Northern Railway would be protected by the Transport Administration Act, which has to be amended by Act of Parliament to close a line before any rails can be removed. Those who defend the railway corridor today will go on claiming those assurances. Now, the Tumbarumba rail line's been mentioned. It's proposed to be developed on an obscure and short branch line, and it's marked in pink near Wagga Wagga on the rail network map. To use this as a model for legislating to extinguish the legal protection of the main North line, whether it's for 34 kilometres or the whole 214, is ridiculous and is going to meet mounting opposition.
Matthew, 1 minute.
Thank you. Taking account of these obstacles that face the NERT proposal in its particular form that's been put forward, a form that requires the destruction of the permanent way, it would be better if Council refrained from a substantial investment of ratepayers' money at this point, but continued with the low-cost in-house study already agreed upon. Now, the New England Rail Trail proposal document has not been made widely available. I want to suggest that Council treat it more like a development application and publish it for comment and review. The proposal itself lays claim to full stakeholder consultation, but the couple of meetings that have taken place have not really achieved this. For little financial outlay, Council could receive submissions and, more importantly, could approach NERT themselves to outline alternatives for recreational access near or along the rail corridor that would not involve closing the line and destroying the track. So I would encourage councillors not to support
Matthew,
the rescission
thank you.
motion. Thank you.
Councillor Withers, can you jump up and turn that mic off, please? Right, moving on to item 6, confirmation of minutes. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Withers, Councillor Robertson. Councillor, anyone detect any corrections required on the minutes? For all those three, the ordinary council meeting, closed council and extraordinary meeting. Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Moving on to item 7, which is the mayoral minute, which came in late. So the recommendation is that the resolution passed by an Armidale Regional Council on 28th of February 2018 concerned the approval of council's area being included in the joint organisations area that, in addition to those council areas prescribed in the previous resolution, council endorses the area of the Narrabri Shire Council be included in the area of the joint organisation. So that recommendation is there. The if you remember back in 28th of February, we did have all 6 councils, that's from Uralla to Tenterfield, Inverell and Moree. Now, at the time, I was advised that we would form the JO, we would then decide as a JO that whether we as a group would accept Narrabri's request to join us. Since that time, however, the other councils have made their position clear. So all the other 6 councils have decided whether they want to have Narrabri included or not. My recommendation is that we include Narrabri in our group, because Narrabri, if you recognise, is just to the south of Moree, so it's a similar sort of area as us. So you've got all the information there in the background. So does anyone wish to speak? Sorry, can you get a second for me, please? Do I need a second? Oh, no, don't. So anyone wish to speak for this? Oh, sorry. I'm moving from the floor. Thank you, Councillor Tiley. So I'm moving it. We don't need a seconder as it's a mayoral minute. So anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Then I'll put the motion as it is. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Moving on to item 8.1, notice of rescission. The council meeting, item 13.6, the rail trail. So the motion's there, the resolution to be resolved is up on the screen. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Gray. Seconder, Councillor Murat. Councillor Gray.
I might want to put my mic on. The reason why this rescission motion has been put forward is because from the previous meeting, it became quite confusing as to what the conversation was about. Pardon my voice, if you can't hear me, just let me know. Some comments were made and I felt that they needed clarification. So upon leaving the meeting, went back, sought further information and requested that we put forward this rescission motion. The feasibility study, in my view, is a matter of clarification, a clarification of whether the rail trail is feasible or not. And to do that, we as councillors need more information. We need the facts. Not only us, but also the community needs the facts, so that informed decisions can be made all round. This means that the feasibility study needs to be taken upon by appropriately skilled people, which will require funds. To have just an in-house at no cost or low cost feasibility study, while that would be great if we had the skills in-house, and no disrespect to anybody in council, I don't believe we do. I believe that the cost involved is fair when considering that if we went ahead with a rail trail, just hypothetically, went ahead with a rail trail and then in hindsight found out that it was going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. $50,000 is not a lot. Yet also if the feasibility study comes back and says, well, it's going to cost us that and we as council decide not to go ahead, then so be it. All this is a fact-finding study. We need to put this to bed. We need to stop going round and round in circles. We need to know where we stand as far as a rail trail is concerned. Not only that, this rail trail is well and truly documented in our economic development strategy that was unanimously passed just at the end of 2017. It mentions it numerous times throughout the document and also as an action item that the feasibility study will be undertaken. I think it's very naive to think that we will get the facts that we need by in-house, no cost, without the appropriate qualified people. It would be like having a nurse, and no disrespect to nurses, doing neurosurgery. It just doesn't work. So I wish to state very, very clearly as well that I am neutral on this topic. I am neutral to the extent that I do not have the required facts in front of me to make an informed, educated decision on either way. So this is not for a rail trail, it is not against a rail trail, it is for a study to provide us facts. Thanks.
Councillor Moran.
Excuse me. I, like Councillor Gray, am not an expert on rail trails. I'm not an expert on trains. I don't have the ability to be able to make a decision on this thing one way or the other. I, like her, am neutral on this situation. If it turned out that the train system was viable, I'd be happy to support that. And the same thing with the rail trail. When we had the speakers just a minute ago, they mentioned that they would like, the NERT people mentioned they would like council to be able to verify that the rail trail is viable. Well, they haven't even got a business case that proves that. So the information they're giving us is not reliable. The information we're getting from the rail people is a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. I need facts. So I'm supporting this motion to get those facts, and if it costs council $50,000 to be able to make a proper decision on this and to allow public comment and for allow the public to make a proper decision on this, then it's justifiably a good thing to spend that money on this study.
Just a point of clarification as well. The Glen Innes 7 Shire has allocated $10,000 towards this study in conjunction with the Armidale Regional Council. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I quote from the Bible we all voted for unanimously: undertake a feasibility study and prepare a full business case for the New England Rail Trail project. That's in the introductions, and then you go further in the economic development outcomes and performances. Undertake a feasibility study and prepare a full business case. And you go to the appendix and it says, undertake a feasibility study and a full business case for the New England Rail Trail project. So if we don't follow that, we might as well throw that away. The point is, we have developed a strategy, we have adopted it unanimously. I don't like making decisions that are ill-informed. Yes, I am in favour of the rail trail, but I'm prepared and need to acknowledge that we need expert opinion. To suggest that we could do a desktop study when we're down 3 staff in the economic development area, we've only got a director and 1 other staff and 1 temporary staff member in that area, is beyond a joke, because they are frantically busy putting grant applications in and doing other projects like Qantas, like other things, that they don't have the time to turn around and do this sort of strategy. So I'm fully supportive of the resolution. Let's stick to what we stuck to with this document and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Robinson.
Oh, unfortunately, the rescission motion prevented the desktop study from going ahead. And because of that, I did some research of my own, including reading the 2014 feasibility study on the Goulburn to Crookwell Trail by the same consultant that has been recommended for our study. I've also cycled on several rail trails. I've even spent a weekend building one myself, and I've participated in long-distance cycle rides. And going back to this consultant study, the key factors for a successful trail are good marketing, strong community support, and accessibility to a large population centres. The Goulburn to Crookwell Trail will attract day trippers from Sydney, Canberra and Wollongong. And also, a good rail trail needs strong and marketing as well as community support. And unfortunately, that particular consultancy report didn't provide a lot of detail about how we would market a trail. And it didn't mention any community opposition, such as we've seen from the Ratepayers Association, as well as Mr. Cherney. And I think these local factors should be addressed first by a desktop study before we spend $50,000 on a consultancy. I'm not saying the consultancy shouldn't go ahead, but first, given our dire budgetary constraints that we've all been subject to, I would suggest that we do the desktop study first to find out if there's any hope of getting a rail trail. And I'd also suggest that any consultant we employ should also consider the attractiveness of other cycling routes. For example, an extension of the Creekland Cycleway to Inces Road. That expansion would make a highly attractive cycle route, and it's close to the same length as the very popular Fernway track. We would have interpretive signs going in as part of our Creekland strategy, and we've got a wonderful community vegetation program going ahead and planting program, and there's also the historic buildings at Uni and then there's also the mountain bike trails on the Uni campus. I wouldn't mind betting that with the right marketing, that particular extension to our cycleway would generate a lot more cycle trips per kilometre and tourist dollars than this proposed rail trail. And that's my opinion as a cyclist who would use both of them possibly. So if we are going to go ahead with the consultant's report, let's widen it to include all the possible attractions and tourist studies. And remember that a local Armadale trail would cost a lot less than the 7 to 10 million and perhaps the $50,000 a year maintenance of a rail trail from Ben Lomond to Black Mountain. Think about it, $7 to $10 million. That's 7 to 10 super playgrounds, 5 or 6 hydrotherapy pools. Surely if we can attract money to this area, there are better things to spend it on. And that is something that we need to look at locally. It's not something we can ask a consultant to do. What else could we spend the money on? What money we're going to likely to get? And also just don't think that a $50,000 consultancy report will guarantee funding or that we can have a shovel-ready project available for the next funding round. As Matthew has indicated, it took 11 months in Parliament to close the Rosewell to Tumbarumba leg. And we might experience similar delays, especially if we have community opposition, which is something that they didn't have. And also the Goulburn to Crookwell leg, that consultancy report was done in 2014. They're still looking for funding. The only thing that's changed so far is that at the cost of less than 12 billion is now gone up to 15.6 million. And for these reasons, I suggest that we first do the desktop study and include in that study other benefits like whether we could extend the unicycle track to Inces Road. And I also suggest that given the community opposition, we meet with the Ratepayers Association, because if we are going to do this, then we really want other people on side. And also because the consultant's report for the rail trail identified that strong community support was a key factor. If we don't have that, then this is not going to work anyway. And we also look at a wider funding opportunities, a wider range of projects that could benefit this region. Like Councillor Bailey has said in the past, I want us to be a can-do council, and that means spending our money wisely, so that what we can do is spend it wisely and maximise the benefits to our entire community.
Anyone want to speak for the motion? Okay, Councillor Gray, you want to reply?
Firstly, thank you to fellow councillors for your comments and feedback. It's interesting that to have a feasibility study, whether it's a desktop or not, firstly it requires the right skills to undertake that study. I don't believe that we do have that. I think that if we are looking for something that is for the whole of the community, this is what this study, this feasibility study does do. We are not just Armidale. We have to look broader than cycling just in Armidale. This gives us an opportunity to find out whether the feasibility of a rail trail is sustainable for the future. That's economically, it's environmentally, it's also ecologically. We need to know that it's sustainable for the long term, and we cannot do that without the facts. I appreciate that maybe a desktop would start, yet, you know, it's just another stalling tactic. Let's get this done. Let's get these facts out there and start making decisions and have the community informed as to what is reported back to us so we can make well-informed decisions. And thank you very much, Mr Mayor, for your comment around the Glen Innes Severn Council. That is a indicator of the support beyond our region, which then shows that we as a council are having good relations with our neighbouring councils and working together as a region, not just as one community of Armidale. We are the Armidale Regional Council, and we can now work with councils on our neighbouring sides as well. So thank you for that comment.
Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour, now what we're doing is voting on the rescission, to vote the rescission motion. Those in favour of the rescission motion? Those against? The motion is approved, as passed. So what we're going to do now, I want a procedural motion now to bring item 9.1 forward. So can I have a move in it, Councillor Murrat, Councillor Gray? Those in favour of the procedural motion to go forward?
Can I make an amendment? Move to make an amendment?
This is just a procedural motion to bring that item forward, is it?
All right. Okay, never mind.
So, those in favour of bringing that item forward? Against? Passed. So we go to item 9.1. 9.1 is, as indicated, engage a appropriately skilled and credible firm to undertake a business case, and the rest of the wording. So can I have a move and a second?
I'll move my amendment.
Councillor Gray?
Now can I move the amendment?
It has to go on the table first, please. And a second, Councillor Murrat. Yes. Councillor Gray?
I think I've pretty much covered everything with the rescission motion.
Councillor Murrat?
I think it was covered as well.
Anyone wish to be for the motion?
Mr Mayor, there's an attempt here to move an amendment to the motion to broaden it.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the...
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'd like to move an amendment that goes something like this. The council engage an external, appropriate skilled and creditable firm to undertake a business case, cross out, for the New England Rail Trail as required under clause 4.2 of Council's Economic Development, blah, blah, and put instead to explore all options for rail corridor tourism opportunities. Just up to, cross out from for the New England Rail Trail down to Council on December, up to, maybe just economic development strategy will do. Yeah. You can delete all, actually. That's a bit much.
Is that the motion amendment, that is? A seconder? Councillor O'Connor? So, Councillor O'Brien, would you like to speak for them?
No, I'm in first. Mr Mayor, I foreshadow an amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Tiley.
Foreshadow an amendment, leaving the rail trail in and extending it by those few words. So let's do the business case for the rail trail, and at the same time, explore all options for rail corridor tourism opportunities.
What did he do?
Did you get all the words for that?
What did he do?
Is that Councillor O'Brien?
Rail trail tour. Yep. Okay. No. All right. Okay. I'm just taking notes. I've been listening to the various speakers. As we know, this is an issue that's divided the community for many years, probably about 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. And I think everybody's on the same page that they want something good for the area. They want tourism opportunities, they want economic development. It's just a different perspective in terms of, you know, what people think is possible, what they think is desirable, what they are thinking in terms of long-term or short-term. So why not put many more options on the table and have a look at that? While we're having this argument discussion, and I have heard this over years too, even when I was running for state parliament, was the many wonderful ideas people put forward about what's possible, from steam trains to rail and train corridor combinations to mountain bike trails that are connected to train rides. I've heard so many wonderful opportunities that are possible for tourism along the rail corridor. And I think we should maybe have a look at all of those, have a look at what other opportunities are possible, rather than, you know, threaten the future of our corridor. Because the closure to such an important, huge infrastructure is, you know, it's a huge step for the future, huge step. And a lot of people feel very afraid of that. So yes, it's a beautiful place, a beautiful ideas for tourism, but let's see what else could be done with it. What else? Just hang on. In terms of the AEC report, this shouldn't be knocking the rail transport idea on the head, because it's not what, for example, we weren't involved in getting together the brief, or we weren't involved in understanding why that particular report came across. So we don't actually, we would have liked to have seen it go to the Queensland border. So we don't really take that as a death knell of the Great Northern Railway at all. And also, Councillor Bailey, when he talks about what our community strategic plans are, we're also, one of our community strategic plans was also to ensure that we build great transport for this area, that we look at the possibility of future transports, to look at ourselves within a much bigger region and not just here. I think cutting off the possibility of rail transport to the border for the future is, you know, a huge step just for perhaps short-term thinking. I think anything we can do to improve tourism here would be fantastic, but not at the expense of something so huge as cutting off our railway to the Queensland border, perhaps forever. Which rail was it? Explore options for the rail corridor and cycle. Yeah, we can do combination of rail trail cycling and the rail corridor being kept in place. I don't think we have to choose one or the other. So I'm just asking, if we're going to have a look at a business case or a business study and we're going to spend money on it, let's put all kinds of options on the table. Let it explore a much wider arena of things that could be done to improve tourism. Let's not just make just one particular idea from one particular group to push one particular agenda. This rail corridor is really important to people. And it may be important, again, let's not be known as the council that closed down the Great Northern Railway for maybe a short bike trip, which could be great for short term, but we don't know. So I'm saying let's put more things on the agenda here. Let's put more things in this business study. Let's look at short, heritage train trips. Let's look at extending it to maybe further down the track. Let's not just close it all off. So I'm just suggesting the amendment might include move forward in unity with a greater idea rather than a more restricted one. That's all.
Councillor Tyler, I have to pass to Councillor O'Connor first. She's the seconder.
Okay, I have some concerns with the amendment, Mr Mayor, in that a majority of council have just passed a motion 7-4 to go ahead with a business case for a rail trail. This has taken that out, so I see it as a direct negative. However, be that as it may, could I suggest to the movers of the original motion that if we were to leave the business case for the rail trail in and explore other options at the same time, you're not happy to do that? Well, I just think that it's a more complete process. Anyway, leave it with you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor O'Connor. The seconder would have to agree with it.
Yeah, yes. Look, sorry, I'm willing to accept the Tiley amendment to the amendment, if you like. As a seconder.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that amendment as well.
If you can just switch the mics off for a minute, please. I've just got Mr CEO to provide some guidance on this.
Did you hear what these people just said, Mr Mayor?
Sorry, I didn't.
That they withdraw their amendment in favour of the foreshadowed amendment, okay? Right?
Right. Speak.
Actually, that's not.
So, Councillor Tyler, you're foreshadowed?
Yes. So, in doing that, I now move the amendment and appeal to the people that support the original motion to simply extend a little bit the business case by looking for all the options that there might be in terms of rail tourism along the rail route. That's all. It's a minor amendment, and I just think that it's more complete, and along the way it's most important that we take the public with us and consult with them.
Councillor O'Brien. Sorry, O'Connor.
Well,
your wording, please, Councillor Tyler.
Councillor, Mr Rose just asked me a question. Can I answer it? Thank you. It's the same as the wording on page 6 of the business paper. Undertake a business case for the New England Rail Trail and explore all options for rail corridor tourism opportunities. That's a mere extension of the business case.
Is that? Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Can I, as the mover of the original motion, make a suggestion, an amendment to that a very slight amendment, and that is that the rail trail is the first priority, and take out the word all. Explore other, take that word out, and that the business case for the rail trail is the priority of the feasibility study. Silly. The reason for that is that where the funds are already allocated, the budget for 50,000 is for the feasibility of the rail trail. And I believe that that's where the energies need to be and finances need to be directed to first.
Councillor Tyler, are you happy with that change? Or?
Half a loaf of bread's better than none. Okay.
Can I have a seconder for your Councillor?
Well, the mover of the motion is accepting those words with that minor change, so we don't need an amendment. We're all happy little Vegemites.
So, Councillor Morat, since you are the second of the original motion, are you happy with that amendment?
I'll take the other half a loaf of bread and I'll go with it.
Oh, you are. Now, yes, Councillor, someone was to speak. So, we've got this motion as been amended with wording up on the screen. So we're all clear on what we're voting for and debating?
Can I ask a question?
So, Councillor Bailey?
Could I ask a question, please? Do we have any, if we've allowed $50,000 for the rail trail study, the business case, do we have any indication of what it will cost to get the extra part done? I mean, we've just finished a tourism study where everybody workshopped over 3 days, or people had an opportunity over 3 days to workshop on tourism ideas. Anything was on the table. We've just outlaid all that money, and now we're proposing to go back in and do another thing. I'm just concerned that in a limited time, everyone's concerned about the cost of spending $50,000. We're now saying, oh, not $50,000, it's going to be a bit more because we're going to tack this on and tack that on and tack that on. Maybe the CEO could give us an answer. Any idea what it might cost, Mr. CEO?
I'll ask Mr. CEO. Councillor O'Connor, will you turn your mic off, please?
Councillors, as I sit here, I don't have any concept of the extent of other options that would need to be investigated, so I can't respectfully provide a response. If the motion is passed, what I would suggest would need to happen is that we would have to research those other options and bring you a report back to get some clarity from you in terms of what extent and what cost would be involved in progressing this motion if it's carried.
Question, Mr. Mayor, would it not be feasible today for the council to put a limit on the process? Do it within a budget of?
Well, I guess the original concept was $50,000. If you're going to extend that to do more, then something has to be done cheaper or less detailed. So that would depend on whether council, they will not get the information to the depth that's required. If they're happy to make a decision on partial information, fine. But that would be the consequence of that decision. Now, everyone's clear on what they've got up in front of them. Now, just anyone wish to speak for this motion? Against?
Yeah. Yep.
Councillor Witters.
Oh, g'day, Bradley. Thanks for having me. I do have some concerns, not about the bike trail, more about the money put into it, the $50,000. Having seen some concerns from the community in regards to other consultants that the council has employed in regards to other projects the council is looking to do, and the uproar that has caused on why we need to spend so much money, I'm going to ask, should the onus of everything we've just discussed here be put on the proponents of the rail trail to be provided to council, and that council money and time should be limited in regards to it, because it's more their responsibility to provide us with the information that we need, and less of ours to go and hunt for it, in my opinion. And considering the fact that we've got a budget that we've just put in where it's fairly close to being all allocated to where it needs to go, an extra $50,000 in regards to something that I think we could rely on the wonderful people who are for this proposal to help provide us with their expertise to bring us all the information that they have, would be a better financial and viable option, and help that way the community can also have their say and their input on exactly what we need to know. I think it would be a better option than spending $50,000 that could go to maybe some more, I won't say more needier areas, I'd say maybe spent a little bit differently. Thanks.
Anyone speaking for the motion? I'll ask Councillor Gray for her right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Witters, I have to thank you for your comments, because it is something that I have thought very hard about. And my conclusion in analysing that option was that the risk of any feasibility study coming from NERT, paid by NERT, would be perceived as biased, and therefore we would be right back where we are right now, where there would be a need for an unbiased feasibility study to be done. And I thought long and hard about that, and I think that this council has a responsibility to find the facts on not only what it costs, but the long-term sustainability of whether it is feasible to have a rail trail or not. There is there is no doubt that any feasibility study undertaken by the people who are for it, in this day and age, it would be a logical conclusion for some people to deem it as being a biased study. And that is the reason why I believe that it needs to be handled within council by independent consultants. Secondly, it is already budgeted. It's already in the budget as it is. It's already been allocated. And I'm pretty sure that there would be argument that there would be other areas within council where money has been allocated where we could have the exact same conversation. And yet it is deemed as being needed because of the independence of which these studies can be given by council. I would also like to just finish with that in having the rail trail as a priority, it means that we can undertake the feasibility study while also seeking the options, the other options. So we're not at a standstill. We're already moving forward and keeping it unbiased and independent from any other groups.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Now, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as displayed? Those against? The motion's passed. And what I would ask is that the CEO just respond and bring back a report to council.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what we will, it's still quite an open-ended resolution, so what we would do is we will bring back a report to the next council meeting after we've had a chance to look at options to make sure we've got agreement from council in terms of the options to be investigated, the potential depth of investigations, and if that potentially results in a perceived need for additional budget, we will raise that in the report that comes back as well.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Moving back to item 8.2, that resolution 64/18 be rescinded, which resolved that council deletes condition 7 and 47 from DA 19/2009/A. So can I have a mover, please?
So move.
Councillor Tiley, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Tiley.
Mr. Mayor, I support retention of these two conditions, which require a 6 metre wide easement for a future shared path for public access directly adjacent to the alignment of Jumeric Creek on either side of the creek. In debate a month ago, there were misleading and incorrect statements made by some councillors. Councillor Gray, in her opening address, stated that this is private property, and if being sold as a farm, an easement would not be available to the public. This is not the situation. The physical commencement of the development consent has occurred, which means that the consent is valid. A modified consent issued in February 2017. This property is not a farm any longer. Rather, it will become, on registration of subdivision linens, 70 separate parcels within a low-density residential zone. Councillor Gray suggested that if council was to require public access to the creek, then it should purchase the 6 metre strip. Councillor, an easement is a couple of lines on the map, which costs council nothing, but simply enables a future pathway if that becomes necessary. Why spend money needlessly now if there is no immediate necessity? Councillor Gray asked whose responsibility it would be if there was indeed public access on private property. An easement is simply a mechanism to enable future access. Without the easement being taken up, clearly the public are trespassing. Councillor Gray opined that there has never been any demands from the public in the past to have creek access here. Perhaps true, perhaps not. Undoubtedly, however, there eventually will be an extra 70 homes and families and perhaps 200 to 300 people living in close proximity to this natural asset, which will ignite that demand in conjunction with other future subdivisions in proximity. Council as community custodians should demonstrate vision and plan now, while opportunity remains to accommodate that inevitable demand. Councillor Gray referred to what she termed contingencies, which she discovered on a site visit and relating to access for bikes, walking through, etc., which she asserted would be more than adequate for what she acknowledged as a future growth precinct. However, the councillor did not disclose what those contingencies might be. The reality is that once these two conditions are removed, a section of the creek will be lost to Joe and Jenny Public forever. Councillor Gray suggested that retention of these conditions would create a precedent whereby council could in future demand unnecessary condition on future subdivision. Incorrect. Each planning application is its own special case. All DAs are determined in accordance with legislated requirements. This matter is before us because it is contentious and there are opposing views. There are matters of high principle involved, especially that of intergenerational equity, the rights of those who follow. Also the precautionary principle, if in any doubt, don't, and protection of public access rights to a beautiful natural asset. Councillor Gray then suggested that we needed to respect the rights of people who own private property, a spurious argument. This land is in process of becoming 70 properties, and I ask why two future owners of lots 32 and 33 should obtain ownership of part of a beautiful creek where people, including especially the other 68 future owners and nearby residents, should be able to stroll, fish, picnic and enjoy a special passive recreation locality. In our city, this scarce and precious resource needs access protection for those who tread this earth after us. Councillor Martin stated that there was a need to make decisions so we can move forward. Sorry, this is not a sound reason for acceding to a developer's monetary interest at the expense of the infinitely greater public interest. Councillor Witt has expressed concerns about access, maintenance and how to link to the existing bike track, and that a better location for the easement would be on the northern side of the creek. I agree. Very happy for that to be the agreed outcome today. The matters Councillor Witt has raised can be addressed with occurring residential growth, but only if we have secure easements. This is not about future bike tracks. Even the staff report was confused on this point. It is about preserving public access rights for reasonable purposes. Councillor Bailey suggested that we have double the green space we need in Armidale. By what measure? A personal subjective view, and that this easement would be an imposition on ratepayers. If more ratepayers were aware of this situation, I believe they would concur that this is a very special creek frontage and green space. The councillor also
Councillor Tiley,
we were turning away.
Councillor Tiley, your time is up.
Didn't you give me 4 minutes? You didn't give me a bell at 4.
There's no bell for councillors.
I need 1 minute, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I'll cut a couple of paragraphs out. I'll let Councillor Gray off a little bit lightly, and I'll finish by saying an easement for a future shared pathway, if needed, is the best possible outcome from a planning and community perspective. Retention of these two conditions will support the livability of our inevitable city expansion. Let this council show we care, we are leaders, we have genuine vision. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor?
Can I speak now? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd like to thank Councillor Tiley for his very detailed explanation of how councillors here really need to reframe this. This application was brought a long time ago as a development application when farmland was being converted into, as Councillor Tiley has said, 70 residential blocks. These are the two stub ends back onto the creek, and they're slightly larger blocks. Now, when our planners receive this kind of conversion from one class of land, if you like, which is farmland into residential, there's a whole range of matters that they have to consider, and one of these is the public interest. And I think it's sort of understandable, but certainly not something that we should accept, that we should get confused about private and public rights in relation to these planning decisions. The planning decision was made that when you make that conversion to multi-blocks, which obviously is something that's going to be economically advantageous to the proponent of the development, you've got to look at the fate and the long of those blocks in that residential subdivision, and you must look at the amenity at two levels. The first one is the amenity that's now going to be delivered to all those residents of the now much more densely allocated housing blocks, living areas. So one of the reasons that our planners way back when this DA was first presented would have asked for this provision, which as Councillor Tyler says, only two lines on a map. It's just an easement for future use of the community. One of those considerations would relate to the amenity available to the 70-odd residents in that community. The second consideration would be for the long-term amenity and attractiveness of Armidale as a place to move to. I think every councillor here would agree that we want to attract residents from other places. We want the city to grow. We want it to be a place which is a beautiful, and increasingly studies are showing in times of difficult employment that amenity is probably the most significant factor in retaining a population, especially when work is difficult. So we want to retain the population we have with amenity. This easement condition was made absolutely in relation to long-term amenity and specific amenity for that particular subdivision. Now, the developers had two opportunities to try and have those provisions deleted. He could have appealed to the court, the Land and Environment Court, when the original condition was applied. He chose not to. He could have appealed after the decision of the administrator to retain those conditions during the merger period. He chose not to. I mean, he's having another go with us, hoping that, you know, we'll be more amenable. But I really appeal to all councillors to trust our planning department and understand that waterside, riparian, creekside, whatever you want to call it, it's scarce. It's a scarce resource to have access to water, and most new developments now include some public walkways. It's not just about cycling, but it's about access to water so that people can have a pleasant walk in the evening. Everywhere you go in the world, and particularly in new developments now in Australia, there's a lot of emphasis put on that sort of amenity. And it is the worst legacy that we could leave is to have a beautiful creekside walkway, cycleway, and then suddenly have to divert through a highly built-up area because we failed to maintain the integrity of our planning system on this occasion by making this one-off exception. One-off exceptions are always a bad idea in planning. We should have a much broader view. So I really ask councillors, in addition to what Councillor Tiley has said, to consider the public interest and our children, our grandchildren who live here, that they will be able to cycle, walk, stroll down the Demerit Creek and just enjoy our city. There is no affectation on rates. This will not make this block less rateable. It is two lines on a map preserving access for future generations. In all the circumstances, don't give way to pressure this is not an argument about public and private property whatsoever. This is a normal
Thank you,
provision.
Councillor O'Connor. So, anyone wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Rodson.
Thank you.
O'Connor, you turn your mic off, please.
Thanks. Well, I'd like to just reinforce what it said in the planning report, that the concept of a shared path along Demerit Creek is considered to be a good outcome from a planning and community perspective. And our job is to consider what's best for our community. And as I've said, I think this is a wonderful community amenity and a tourist attraction. And if you're wanting to attract tourists, what could be better than a route for walking along the creekland that is very close to the visitor centre, so we could send huge amounts of tourists in this direction if we had, because the scenery is beautiful there. And also it's worth noting that I asked council staff where the best route for a cycle or walking track would be, and they said quite clearly that it would be on the south side of the creek, which is where going, in other words, going through this estate. And perhaps it wasn't included in our economic development strategy simply because we thought it was going to happen already. And as everybody said, we are bound by Section 79C of the Planning Act to consider the public interest. We're not holding anything up by retaining these clauses, because the development is going ahead anyway, and nothing we're going to do is going to stop that. It's going to be a development, and also all we can do is make it something that's a real benefit to the community or something that's less attractive. It won't affect the owners of the locks in any way, their access to the creek land in the meantime, or their ability to irrigate their hobby farms. So let's get this right. We need to preserve something like this for the future. The access of the creek for the future of the people who live here in the future, which might even be 20 or it might even be 50 years' time, but we really need to preserve this. And just in case I haven't yet, the three of us haven't convinced council, then I would like to foreshadow a motion that council investigates the community benefits of preserving the option of future pedestrian and cycling access along the creek and works with the developer to achieve a mutually beneficial outcome. So if the rescission motion is lost, I'd like to foreshadow as an alternative wording. Thank you.
Anyone speak against the motion?
Yep.
Councillor Witters.
Now, having read this and read the motion and listened to the thoughts from the last council meeting in regards to this, I wrote down that it needs either a convincing argument to get me to change my mind or some new information. And the information received today is just a rehash of the same information that I believe I heard last time. I haven't heard anything convincing me to change my decision from last time.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Just a clarification, Councillor Robinson, you cannot have an amendment, foreshadow on a rescission motion.
I believe you can. I checked with the Office of Local Government and they have confirmed that rescission motions have to be treated exactly like other motions, which means you can have foreshadowed them.
We'll clarify, but in the meantime, we will...
In the meantime, a point of order, that if it goes, then we have to discuss the whole thing again in the next meeting if your decision is wrong.
Yeah, we'll just stick with the rescission motion. Now, anyone speak for the motion? Okay, I'll put it to Councillor Tiley as right of reply. No right of reply? No. Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Now, we're voting on the rescission motion, so those in favour of the rescission motion? And this is a Division 2, so I will require, just hold the thought, there's 4. Those against the rescission motion? 4 against. Did you get all that? The motion is lost. Sorry? So we now move on to item 10.1. Acquisition of drainage reserve at 180A Kentucky Street. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Robertson. Councillor Murat. Councillor Robertson.
I'll reserve a right of reply.
Councillor Murat.
I think the recommendation is quite clear. It's just an easement that has been there and needs to be just put back on council's books as operational land, so it's straightforward.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? It's passed. Item 10.2, which is the proposed road rename from Pine Forest Road South to Mont Lane. So can I have a mover? Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray, Councillor Murat.
No comment, straightforward.
Same.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Otherwise, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Passed unanimously. Yes. Item 10.3, another renaming Cooks Road extension off Grafton Road to Autumn Lane. Mover, please. Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murat, same.
Same thing, yes. Support the council officer's recommendations.
Councillor Martin. And we speak for? You wish to speak for Councillor O'Connor?
Yes, just in a general sense, I would like to point out that this is a matter that maybe the community would be interested in hearing, and that is that the Names Board is trying to make sure that there are no awkward situations where two parts of a road are called the same thing. That makes it very difficult in emergency situations for rescue or ambulances to get to those. There's confusion, and we have a number of them in Armidale, and we need to iron them out. So I would commend council officers for doing this, so that we're all safe in relation to when a call out is contained. We don't have happens for an emergency. We don't have emergency vehicles going to the wrong same named road. Thank you.
So, anyone wish to speak against? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item 10.4, which is the meeting cycle for ordinary meetings for July 2018 to August 2020. A mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Galletley. Councillor Bailey.
As all the councillors aware, we've had a workshop. There seems to be a degree of consensus, and let's move forward and try the new meeting cycles.
Councillor Galletley.
Yeah, I think one of the few things that we got out of the way fairly quickly. So I applaud us for the good decisions. I'm for it all. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? And unanimous. So moving to item 10.5, which is the quarterly budget review statement, third quarter. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Galletley. Before I do, can I get the CEO just to clarify some points in this?
Sorry, councillors, just an apology. When we sent the agenda out for you, there were some headings missed off page 17. Just the what the columns represent. We sent you out an updated agenda this morning, just putting those headings in. Effectively, they're just general water and sewerage at the top of those columns. And secondly, the Mayor's just asked me to clarify that in terms of the grant funding, we weren't successful with. It relates to an ambitious bid for grant funding for bridges, and we weren't successful in gaining all of that grant funding.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, Councillor Gray?
No comment.
Councillor Galletley?
I've been through this thoroughly, and I applaud him. Thank you very much.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Okay, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Now to the item 10.6, which is fixing of mayor and councillor fees for 2018-2019. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bailey?
Self-explanatory, it's just a CPI increase.
Yeah, no comment from me either.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? I'll put that to vote. Those in favour? Pass. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Murat. Do you want your vote recorded? Thank you. Item 10.7, water billing adjustment. As in the screen, they can have a mover. Councillor Gillespie, Councillor Murat. Councillor Gillespie?
I was approached a little while ago by Mr. Gary Hamilton, who has recently put a new premises on 31 Grandview Crescent. Now, he was under the assumption that he had to do some landscape work to get the final tick of approval for him to move into his house. So he thought, well, it's got to be done. It wasn't at a very opportune time, but he thought, well, righto, I'll get in and do this. He ended up doing a good job on it. Anyway, he with the turfing of it all, he got an excess water bill, and which has come to $780. All that he's asking is that in the excess water use of the normal residential area, he'd just be brought back to the normal scale of $2.47 rather than to the $3.28 and then the $3.73 for the next lot as well. All he's basically asking is that then can we please just have a look at this. He was on the assumption that with the DA he had to do this to have it finished off properly for him to move in. All it is knocking $100 and something bucks off his water bill. He came and approached me. I said, I can run with it for you. Sure, no worries. And that's what I'm doing now. So instead of the bill being $780.03, it's $644.67. I'd just like if we could get it down to that figure and do the right thing by this chap. Thank you.
Councillor Gletley, though, you seem to be speaking against the motion because the motion is that not be approved.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking for it. Sorry. Beg your pardon.
So do you wish to withdraw your move?
Yes, please. Sorry about that.
Could I... Councillor Murat, can I get a seconder then, please? Councillor Tarley, Councillor Murat.
I agree with the council staff that it wasn't due to any failure of the water system on the property or council's supply. We do give concessions to people where there is a break in the pipes or whatever. This is not happening in this particular case. So it was normal water usage for that property. So my feeling is we go with the staff and don't give the water adjustment.
Councillor Tiley. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? You wish to speak against the motion? Yes. Councillor Gletley.
Yes, I had a resident approach me about a water bill that he received. He was at 31 Grandview Crescent. It's a fairly new area up there. He was of the assumption through the DA that he wouldn't get the tick of approval for him to move into his house unless he did all the landscaping and had it all finished off so that it wouldn't erode away and get onto the street or whatever his assumption was. He approached me. And I said, yeah, sure, mate, I can come down and find out. I found out about it, and I do agree that that it isn't any extraordinary situation as Councillor Murat brought to our attention. I just think little grey areas like this of having a look at it through the ratepayer's eyes. He's got an excess water bill of $780 as the whole bill. All he wants to do is to knock the arrears off the exorbitant prices that were charged above the water, the residential area stuff. So basically speaking, it comes down to $644.67 instead of the $780.03. I'm just working on him to see if we can make an amendment and look after our ratepayer that was felt that he was misled. Thank you.
Anyone want to speak for the motion? So I'll give the right of reply to Councillor Murat.
No thanks.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? The motion's passed. Item 10.8, which is the community strategic plan, be reaffirmed, noting the changes following the public exhibition outlined in the report. Can I have a move of Councillor Murat? Councillor Gray, Councillor Murat. Page 25, Councillor Murat.
Yep. 25. That's the water bill adjustment. 26. Yes, this has been out in public exhibition. The councils have had a number of workshops on this. I think it's a straightforward motion that we just accept the feedback from the community and what we've worked through in our workshops at previous meetings. So I commend the motion.
Councillor Gray.
Ditto, Councillor Murat, and also to thank the public for the community for providing their feedback so that we can move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone who wishes to speak for the motion? Against the motion? No, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 12.1. This is the two parts. The draft development contribution plans for council's area. I will require a division for this, so can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Tiley, Councillor Gray, Councillor Tiley. Yes, if you wish. Councillor Gray. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against the motion. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Passed. Oh, sorry. Can I have your hands up, please, because of the division? It's all. Thank you. So, Bailey, I was just flicking through my pages here. Item 12.2, I believe we're up to, which is the planning proposed for draft amendment number 11 to OLL Generic LEP 2012, and there's in three parts there. Again, I'll require a division on this, so can I have a mover, please, Councillor Tiley?
No, I want to ask a question, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yes, Councillor.
Could I ask a question of the planner or the engineer? In relation to this, we're allowing for high density residential development. The access road comes on a Magic Drive where there's a very steep embankment. I'm just a bit concerned about safety. Is there a requirement for the developer to shave back the embankment for better sight distance, or is there a requirement for turning lanes or whatever?
Thank you, Councillor. Your microphone, please. Thank you. I'll just ask the CEO to respond on that.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could please ask Mr. Horman if he could provide a response.
At this stage, no. Councillor Tyler, it's not required. At this stage, no, it's not required because we're in the rezoning phase of the proposal. When they lodge an application for the actual subdivision, we'll be dealing with road safety and road infrastructure at that point in time.
So we're going to change anything?
In all likelihood, yes.
I stood there this morning, believe me, it's dangerous. Even though it's only 50 k's only. Your sight distance is very good. Thank you.
Mover. Oh, you've got a question, Councillor Connor?
Yes, I do. I just noticed this is still referring to the Armidale Generic Local Environment Plan, 2012. Is there any indication of when the two plans will be brought together?
Mr. CEO?
Sorry, again, if I can ask Mr. Horman to respond.
There we go. Yes, we currently have that project out to a consultant who's preparing the merging of the two LEPs, hoping to bring that to council for putting on public exhibition in the foreseeable future. He's just got to tie a few things up around our heritage inventory.
Thank you. Now, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Martin, Councillor Gray. Councillor Martin. Anyone speak for the motion? Against? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Oh, sorry, this will be division, so please hold your hands up. So, unanimous. Thank you. Item 12.3, which is the modification to DA 198/2016A. And Mr. CEO has vacated the chair. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Gray. Councillor Tiley, Councillor Gray.
This recommendation, I think, is very pertinent to us as councillors needing a little bit more information around the developer servicing plan, the DSP. So therefore I support that we investigate the application.
Councillor Tiley.
The motion is simply to investigate the application of a DSP, and that's good. We need a fair outcome. We need a fair contribution, and hopefully this will point to that, or this DSP will point to that.
Speaker for the motion. The speaker against the motion, or?
Just a speaker on the motion. This matters, council have had a submission put in or had a presentation from the TAS people at a workshop. The councillors have been informed on some of the issues around this case. I think there's a lack of clarity here. The council staff can't advise the councillors whether this is a boarding house, a hostel, or a school, how the DSP charges will be allocated. Just from memory, I think that the DSP charges for a boarding house is 390,000 and it comes back to 120 something for a boarding house, and in the vicinity of $20,000 if it's classed as a school. From the information we were provided when Tas made the presentation, the number of students that are presently boarding at that school at the moment is 233. The number of beds available are 322. At its peak, Tas actually had 393 students there. So there is no greater use of water under this new development than was previously utilised by TAS at its maximum boarding school numbers. The difference is that when it would have had its maximum, the school had dormitories. These dormitories just had beds side by side. Now they've gone to individual rooms. They've had to build this new boarding school because of the intake of female students, and this has to be recognised by the council. And on page 41 of this, I've got to find it, it says that in an effort to pursue the idea of collecting DSP contributions based on student or staff numbers, legal advice was initially sought as to what mechanisms needed to be put in place. The advice returned the following observations, and this is council's own legal advice, that DSP contributions can only be collected where the demand on existing water or sewerage or public infrastructure is identified. Well, council, from its own research and from the records of TAS, can't identify an increased water charge. TAS have offered to pay, at that meeting, they said they'd be marginally happy to pay a DSP based on the building being zoned as a school, not a boarding house or a hostel. Council's interim occupation certificate for that building expires at the end of July. This study could take a lot longer than that. I think for clarity, this council needs to make a decision. Firstly, we need to continue on with that study. We need clarity for not only TAS, but all the other schools in Armidale, if they put in future development applications, as to what council's policy is going to be. But we need to give TAS clarity now, and surely we can modify that or add to that policy to come to some agreement with TAS. It's basically over what that building is classed as, whether it's a boarding house, a hostel or a school, and TAS have offered to pay the DSP charges based on it being a school, so I suggest we would accept those charges and let things move on and get on with that study so we can give clarity for future developments.
I might ask our acting CEO to get some clarity through our planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know Ambrose Holman's had a significantly long history with this particular project, so I'd ask Ambrose if you could clarify some of the points that Councillor Morat has made.
I'll have a go. So, yes, it has dragged on for a substantial period. The occupation certificate does run out. Council can extend that occupation certificate with a view of having this resolved. The school assumption would work on the fact that the student numbers have actually decreased, and therefore this development would not attract any contribution. So that's around that scenario of how many students they had before. The actual student numbers are not increasing, and therefore council would not be charging a contribution at this stage for this development. That's where we'd be going with what you were just saying then, Councillor Murat. The further investigation study would be undertaken as part of the development of our new DSP policy to look at taking away the ambiguity around the schools in town that also have boarding students as well as day students, to establish the demand they have on our network should they expand in the future. I hope that answers most of that.
Thank you. So, anyone else wish to speak against the motion? Okay, Councillor Gray, do you want to write a reply? Oh, Councillor Bryan.
I'm still a little bit wondering if we agree with this. We're not agreeing on the equivalent tenement per person. Okay, and we're not agreeing on school either. Okay, so we'll go back and have a look at the issues of hostel, boarding house, school and ET. Okay, so that doesn't have to be settled today, right? Okay, all right, thank you.
So, Councillor Gray?
In a writer reply, very simply, this, you can see that there is still confusion around the terminology and what the DSP actually is and the policy around that, hence the reason why it needs to go back to an investigation, and so that we do deliver a fair outcome for all parties involved.
So I'll put this to the vote, and this is another division, so please hold your hands up. Those in favour? Up, unanimous. Thank you. So item 13.1, request to waive fees for the use of the town hall. So can I have a mover? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Gray, was it? Councillor Robinson?
Reserve a right of reply.
Councillor Gray? Is Speaker for? Speaker against? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Pass unanimously. So item 14.1, the cash and investment report. Moved Councillor Murat. Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Murat.
No, it's just told with key sides of the monies, that's fine.
Councillor Gillespie.
I'm big on, it's fine too, because I'm big on the figures, thank you.
Just may I remind you, you are being webcast around the world. So anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item 14.2. This is an independent report on the feasibility of a rail line between Armidale and Tenterfield. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Gray. Councillor Murat. Councillor Gray.
As this report is for information only, I think that taking on board the information, it's going to help us move forward with the informing the community on the viability of an open and commercial operations on our railway line.
Councillor Murat.
Yeah, I just agree with Councillor Gray on that one. It's just a straightforward information document.
Anyone else to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've made my concerns about this document known to other councillors, so I won't say much other than that this is a very small document. Since its release in the documents for this meeting, I've been inundated with phone calls from knowledgeable members of the public who've pointed out the enormous numbers of errors in both the facts here and also the assumptions made. I think for the sake of the public, it should be made very clear that those people who are seriously contemplating restoration of rail service between Armidale and the north have never, with great respect to Tenterfield, seen Tenterfield as their object. Tenterfield's a smaller place than here, and the question arises, why was this, and I must say this, why was this let out in relation to, why was this tender let out in relation simply to a destination of Tenterfield? We've heard from Mr Gary White, who's the new state planner, that we really need, up here in New England Northwest, to turn our attention to megatrends. I've had this from other expert people, international financiers and the like, looking at megatrends across the world. Whether we understand this at the moment or not, we're getting advice from our state planner that metropolitan cities are going to grow and that we are in the extreme north of the state. And because of our geographical location, our sites must be turned towards Brisbane and Toowoomba. There are two very important resources for us in New England Northwest over the border, and these are the Port of Brisbane for seabound freight, and the Wellcamp Airport that's been built in Toowoomba, and that's for air freight. There's a lot of talk in all our planning documents and in planning documents of a higher order, both state and federal, in relation to the boom in agriculture here. So I really must express my absolute disappointment in money being spent on a so-called feasibility study that only relates to this state. I mean, it's absolutely clear that we need to focus our attention on growth towards southeast Queensland. The document, in my view, isn't very reliable. There's a lot of factual errors in it, and I will just, for the record, point out a few. I don't want to labour this point, but I will provide some further information down the track, as we haven't had this for very long. If you bear with me, I'll just explain what's been pointed out to me. The most glaring inaccuracy is the statement, the second line of the report, that says the rail line has not been in operation since the mid-1970s. This is just wrong. The trains have been taking superphosphate north of Armidale into the 90s. There was the Northern Mail train ran until 1988. I won't labour the point. It's disappointing that there's so many factual errors. When we look at Table 1 on page 2, it stated that the North East Rail was 200 kilometres. In fact, it's 317. Ditto with the Carra line, rail line revival, which was actually Blaney to Carra. The distance there is not 21, but 75.54 kilometres. The reference, and those are not the only errors in that table, but I won't burden us with too much information. Wooden sleepers with steel sleepers, this assumption would take the line up to a Class 3 standard, but there's no reason why we couldn't go to a Grade 1 standard, which would be concrete sleepers with a particular Prendol clip, I'm informed, which is much cheaper and would be adequate. We go on and on, but the points I want to make is there are assumptions, there are absolutely relevant factors that are not touched on at all in this report. For example, there's no reference to the government's community service obligation in relation to passenger transport. There is no reference to timetabling considerations and the huge impact they have on the viability of passenger and, to a lesser extent, freight services. There's absolutely no consideration of the implications of the proposed inland rail project. So, I mean, look, the deed's been done, the money's been spent, but the benefit that we can derive from this and the conclusions that can be drawn are little to nil. Thank you.
Anyone want to speak for the motion? The right reply to Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you also to fellow Councillor O'Connor, because in what you've shared, I, to some degree, agree with you in that this is what we get when we spend $7,500 on our desktop study. So, whereas if we spent $50,000 on a feasibility study on the commercial viability of the line, we may well have had all your concerns answered. Hence the reason why you have absolutely provided or alleviated my concerns around why I spoke for a full feasibility study on the rail trail, so that our concerns relating to a desktop study or a cheaper version or a smaller version, well, we're not going to face those same concerns as what we're facing with this desktop study. So thank you very much for your comments.
I'll put this to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? You want your vote recorded?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, he wants it recorded. Item 17.1, which is the minutes of the Traffic Advisory Committee. Could I have a move and a second for all those points? Councillor Martin, Councillor Morant. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I don't have any comment, thank you.
Councillor Morant?
No comment, thank you.
Anyone wish to speak for? Speak against? I'll put those in favour. Those against? Carried. And the last item is 17.2, which is again a note. But could I have a move and a second for this? Councillor Robertson, Councillor Gray, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that the minutes actually covered only a very brief part of the meeting, and that the main business of that meeting was to develop green prints for waste management and transport. And just to advise councillors that I look forward to being able to present that information to council at a later date. Thank you.
So, Councillor Robinson, you're saying the minutes are not correct?
Well, I'm saying that I haven't. This is the first. I didn't see the minutes until it actually was presented to council, and if I had seen them, I would have advised the author that we should have mentioned all the other business that was at the meeting, which was basically in the form of a workshop. So whether we should report workshop results in the minutes is something that maybe is a bit of a moot point, but certainly it's worth noting that there was a workshop and it was a very productive workshop.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Gray?
And just to support Councillor Robertson, there was the workshop. The meeting was actually closed prior to the workshop, hence the reason why that was not recorded. And yes, the further movement along that green print is pretty exciting. So just to support this as information. Thanks.
Anyone want to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Okay, put that to the vote. Those in favour? Passed. Now, before we go into closed session, may I just take the opportunity to thank and pay respect to our interim CEO, Chris Rose. I believe Chris has done an outstanding job in his role here, from providing guidance and counselling to councillors to the mundane tasks of getting a budget into shape for public display. I've enjoyed working with Chris and find his wisdom, professionalism and integrity a real bonus for the Armidale Regional Council. I wish Chris and Sid all the best for their well-deserved break, and thank you for all your work at Armidale Regional Council. Now, can I suggest before we go into closed session we have a 10-minute break and we return back here at, say, 10 past? Thank you. Sorry, can I get a motion before we move out to suspend Councillor Murat, Councillor Gilletley? Are those in favour? Good, thank you.